Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. First and foremost, let's start here. You're probably watching this getting pretty close to the Christmas time, the holiday season. I want to wish each and every one of you a Merry Christmas, guys, and happy holidays. Blessed New Year. I feel very blessed, guys. I feel very thankful to have the support and the growing channel and the growing business that I do. I get to meet some great folks around the country, have a lot of great subscribers here on the channel because I think I try to connect with as many folks as I possibly can, whether you're white collar, blue collar, camo collar, whatever your collar is, right? I've been in this long enough, guys, that I just have met a lot of great folks around the country, and I just want to thank each and every one of you before we get into this video, guys. So let's dive into this one. There's just a lot of missed opportunities, maybe is the thing to say, right, on small acreage. And if you follow the channel, you'll know on some past videos that we've done here, guys, you'll know that my common property or my average acreage that I do private landowners across the the entire U.S. on average, guys, dealing with about 80 clients a year, whether I'm building them or just designing them. My average is somewhere between 60 and 100 acres. It just seems like it stays right there. I've done 2,500s in Alabama, and I've got 1,200 acre piece in Michigan. I've got a lot of large, what I would consider large properties, over 500 acres, and but on average, my most common property is the 40s, 60s, and 80s that the you and I of the world own. And I just don't think that when folks are looking at buying a property, or let's say you have some funds available, you sold a business, you retired, and you're just looking to buy that great hunting property. I think a lot of folks, want to buy this 320 or these 240s or something. And what I encourage folks is to do this, guys. Don't overlook the potential of these small properties for these reasons we're going to touch on today, is because there are many what I refer to as these drive-by properties across the entire whitetail range that multiple times a year there are multiple 4.5, 5.5, 6.5-year-old deer that my clients are harvesting around the country on 10s, 20s, 40s, stuff like that. And the reason for that is, guys, they understand through the teaching, they understand how important their 40 acres, let's say, really is, right? So there's a lot of properties that I think are in good areas that never reach their potential when we're talking about small acreage, because folks don't treat them with a micromanagement mindset. They think that they can, we'll just use this one, the outdoor networks on the TV, flip them on and use the same strategies that folks are using in a low pressured state on 400 and 500 acres. And it's just not the truth. I wish that would go away because it gets more people in trouble than it does help. I want to go over this today, guys, with you, and again, keep this as short as I can, but make it very direct. I think, like I said, a lot of folks just don't understand the importance of having that small property and how much of an influencer you can really be in your community. So when you're looking for property, guys, you have to find a piece of property that fits your long-term goal, right? If you're looking for a property that has multiple people involved in it, you're going to maybe look at multiple acreage, right? More acreage, because what that does, it houses more mistakes. It allows you to get away with more whoopses. 80 clients a year, 80 different mentalities, 80 different strategies that folks hunt, 80 different ways that folks have been raised in hunting. Hunting means a lot of different things to a lot of us, so that ties directly into what we're going to talk about today, guys. So I just laid this out. Let's just use the blue line as a road system. This layout is common across the country, but especially like in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, where squares, but it's real hard to lay out a non-straight line property, guys, and explain. So you fit this to how this fits you. Some of these aren't exactly square because of a road. I want to share something with you here, guys, that I think a lot of folks don't understand. The common average, let's just use laws of average around the entire whitetail range. The law of averages is that a mature buck will, in his prime, right, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5 years old, will travel up to 2.5 miles around a, 2 to 3 miles, let's just say, in the most common habitat, contour, everything plays into that. 2 to 3 miles. That's what encompasses a deer's native line of travel, or what you refer to as a home range, right, of these whitetails. I think a lot of folks overlook the power of these situations right here, guys. Once we get this access issue healed and we know that we're not blowing this out, if you take into consideration that 2 and 3 mile racetrack, if you will, that these bucks in the prime are traveling around your community, I don't think that a lot of folks realize this. A 40 acres, guys, is a quarter by, if we're talking square, right, is a quarter by a quarter by a quarter by a quarter. If you do the math, guys, that's 1 mile around your 40 acres. So you have a home range, 2 to 3 miles, that a buck is usually traveling that far to collect as many does, to breed 4 to 5 does and 4 to 6 does a year, and that correct habitat keeps him moving, and you have the potential to have 1 mile of that racetrack on you. So you are taking 50% or more of that deer's home range, and you have the potential to put it on a 40-acre piece. Why in the world wouldn't you do that, right? I just think it's a simple math thing that a lot of folks don't connect. 80s is 2 miles. You could potentially have 2 miles. Now we're talking straight lines. If you get in this property, guys, and you build a promoted line of travel that we speak of, and you find your stand assemblage, and you build this transition you hear me speak of, and you start putting a promoted line of travel all the way around your property, it doesn't matter if this is to the outside. The more to the outside is actually the bigger. But even around that, the law of averages, guys, it will shock you on how close to a mile that you can keep that. So maybe it ends up being 3/4 of a mile instead of a mile, something like that. But you can house this deer mentality, these cruising buck mentality, way more than a lot of folks think, if you keep the pressure low and you're not blowing deer out before you even get started, right? You want to be the guy in the neighborhood that when these cruising bucks come into your farm, let's say there's a major contour line, maybe you're just in that native line, and there's a piece there that I can help folks understand on how that native line of movement travels around the community. Let's just say this is your dominant contour line that comes through properties, and maybe there's a hill system here and it runs back out, and then it goes 3 miles, and all of a sudden it comes back. That major line is this 2 to 3 mile racetrack, right? Our goal is to bring him in here and slot him into certain parts of the farm and not blow your stink. These areas, guys, right here should be a non-stink area. It's not that you can't hunt them, you just don't want to blow your scent into those areas. So warning, don't hang a stand in there. You want to invite them in, and then instead of bypassing your property and maybe one of these pockets being an opening that's habitat correct, you want them to come in, turn them sideways, turn them left or right, and navigate 1 mile, potentially a mile, around your property before they leave again. If you are in a property, guys, or a community that has contour, you are not going to shut that 2 mile or 3 mile racetrack down. You can build a fence on it, you can build a school on it, you can build roads across it. They will not leave that. That is their native way that flows deer 360 degrees around your community. But this is what you want to focus on, right? Everybody else in your community, maybe not everybody, but a lot of folks, even the folks that have more acreage than you, what you want to do, guys, is you want to be a piece of the puzzle where these deer come back off these ag fields in the morning and working their way back through. You want that buck to come back in when these does are settling through the entire community. You want to slide him in spin him around your property, and then he's going to go back out on that contour line. You're not going to house them 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It's not going to happen. So don't set yourself up believing that, because you're going to set yourself up for failure. What you want to take into consideration is this, guys. When this buck slots in, and he does circulate your entire farm, and it takes him, instead of 10 minutes before, it takes him 45 minutes now, 4 to 5 to 6 times longer than what it did before you started implementing this stuff and these creations. He's on that whole mile racetrack without getting bumped, right? So the way they're wired is there's only so much that they can cover in a day. So many daylight hours, so many miles, right? That's the way that they're wired. They do not know fence lines. So fence lines, guys, mean nothing to deer. They don't know the fence line, right? They just know edge, contour, and pressure is what dictates that, how often they're going to resort and use that entire 2 to 3 mile racetrack. You want to be able to slot that deer in undetected. He travels that entire mile of a racetrack that you built, let's say, right, around your property, and never detected you the entire time he was in there. Doesn't know that you're even hunting. When he leaves, he's thinking, as he's walking off this property, right? He gets about a quarter mile from you, and he knows that Joe here has came in and is hunting here, and is hunting it on the wrong wind, and all of a sudden Joe gets busted, and he goes from here to here. He goes over, and then all of a sudden this gentleman busts him too. What you're doing, guys, is he's putting on way more miles around the community trying to go around this gauntlet, right? What you want to do is when he gets about right here, quarter mile, half a mile away from the farm, he knows that it might take him 3 miles to find all of this. There might be a piece of habitat here that's correct. There might be a piece of habitat up here. There might be this guy, this gentleman had some logging done up here. There might be a piece of this out here off the road that they harvested a bunch of timber, right? These are all habitat worthy, you know, better deer habitat areas. He will travel that entire 3 miles to find that. But if you can get him a half a mile or a quarter mile away, and he knows that he doesn't have to travel that whole 3 miles, he can't be as proficient going 3 miles. It takes him longer. So what happens is, and every time he tries to get to these habitat correct areas, he's running into somebody. Somebody is forcing him off the property, right? Somebody is maybe intentionally, unintentionally, whatever the case is. Maybe they're hunters, maybe they're not. Maybe they're just walking their dog and they bump them, right? Here's the case, guys. If he gets a quarter mile here, all of a sudden he turns around and he comes right back this way. Most properties are set for a food source. Let's just use this. A food source to bedding. Travel. Food to bedding. We're in between. It's a horrible hunting strategy in most cases, guys. Good early season, potentially late season, but not a rut mentality property that you can hunt at all times of the year. And why I say that, guys, is this. Hunting 101, especially bow hunting, is being between food and bed. The problem with it is when this movement comes in and gets back to bed, you're hunting in the center. So is that a half hour after daylight? Maybe. You might sit all day, and then 10 minutes, 15 minutes before dark, you might catch those deer coming back across. And the entire time that these deer are cruising, he's cruising the back side of this, and you never know he's in the world, because this is stationary doe bedding, and you're sitting there all day not seeing it. I want to be in a stand situation like this, where a buck comes in and he's going left to right, and then 20 minutes later, half hour later, 2 hours later, here he comes back from right to left. And the reason is, all of the habitat, it doesn't matter which way that they are circulating around your community, they are reading that habitat at the side of their head. So when they turn their head, they're getting the wind at the back. They turn their head up, they're using their eyes. They're gaining so much information. You want that possibility. One buck goes one way, maybe another buck comes the other way. You're in this circulation of the community where hunting these strategies, it's an inline movement. That is exactly why I take the time to explain to you how important your 40 acres, your 20, your 40, your 80 can really be in the community if it's unpressured and you have as much habitat and as much area for them to dissect on a 40 acres than 2.5, 3 mile racetrack around the entire community. You can house that much on a 40, and I don't think folks really wrap their head around that. That's how important your 40 acres can be in the community. But to end this one, guys, if this access that we started talking about is in here and you're cutting this line of travel and there's a food plot right here because someone said to plant this right here, and every time that you walk in, you're walking through this food source and you're blowing deer off from here to get to a stand in here, whatever the case is, and those deer know you're there, you're not able to be a part of the community that's actually being able to advance deer onto older age structure or pick and choose which deer and you want to pass. It doesn't happen because you aren't housing them long enough to burn daylight hours. That's a law of averages, right? So 45 minutes to an hour, and then he beds close to you, whatever the case is, you want that total at the end of the year to be hours and days that he actually spent on your property. Now you can say, I am potentially a herd influencer. I can actually be part of advancing deer onto the older age structure, and I don't have to own 160. I can only own a 40, but you have to be smart. You have to micromanage your movements, and you have to go the extra mile to know where you're placing these habitat improvements. I'll share something with you guys here in closing. I think a lot of folks overlook this one too. The thing that I look at, guys, on the importance of a small property is this. If you never house a mature buck on 40 acres that just doesn't live there because you've got some good food plots and you've got enough browse through some, FSI and habitat creations, and you're housing. I get this all the time is, hey, the neighbors, the bucks are bedded on my neighbors. That's not a bad thing. And I'm going to explain this to you guys. So throughout a community, because they do not know fence lines, right? If you can bump up your habitat in here and create all of this that's around the community, create that same effect, right? Unpressured, deer-worthy areas on your farm, what you're going to find is this may have been where the does were coming from. Let's just say there was a bunch of does over here because this guy logged this piece of property, right? What that is, guys, they don't know property lines. They just know that was habitat correct. So what you do is you suck all of these does up here to a non-pressured area with grains, greens, and browse. You're drawing these deer into this area, and okay, maybe it is all does, right? But here's the thing. That area right there, off on that 10 acres, let's say, is habitat correct. So what you've done, the reason deer were there, right, is because it's habitat correct. You suck the drama out of there. Now all of a sudden you have a potential for this to be where a buck beds because your does are on you in a more social environment. Yeah, he's bedded on your neighbors, but before this was does, and this was bucks. So now he's a half mile closer than he was before. Now this becomes bucks, like we said. Maybe this becomes bucks as well. Now all of a sudden you've got multiple options closer to you, and what you'll find, guys, is just because of habitat, just because of being unpressured, you're drawing all these bucks closer to you, and they're going to spend more time on your property if they're closer. Then we go back to what we talked about, circulating them in. When they leave, they know that there's more habitat here, more unpressured areas than there is on a 2-mile racetrack, guys. That's how important a small property can be. And I'd like to share that with folks is because I think it's a super, super overlooked area where a lot of people look at, okay, I got to have all these bucks, all these does in here, and I got to have 40 acres at solid habitat. What happens is you can't get on and off the property. You're not thinking about these access issues that we talked about, and all of a sudden you're blowing deer, you're repelling deer. Every time you come on the farm, you're repelling it. You get to the farm, You travel to the farm. The first day, you see some activity. Might run into a buck, might have a close encounter. The second day, less deer, less deer, less deer. You get home, you know, let's say this is a piece that you travel to, you get home, you know, 2 days, you know, hours later, a day later, all of a sudden, these bucks are back on camera. Man, where were they? They knew you were there, right? You sounded the alarm, and it's all because of pressure. 2 days after you leave, more deer start coming. You go back to hunt it, you're making wrong invasive moves, all of a sudden the deer numbers go down. They know you're there, right? You want these arrows, you want all these arrows, guys, to be facing in, not out, right? You want to be the attractor, not the repeller. And I think a lot of folks just don't realize how efficient your property, small property, can be if you're doing everything right and you're not overpressuring it